Hello, back for a book review. Today I'm reviewing a very interesting book that I found in 2019. And this book is called The Magical Sexual Practices of Ancient Egypt. And then the subtitle is The Alchemy of Night in Caridian. And Caridian means manual. So this is all you need for The Alchemy of Night. So this book is written by Judy Hall, and Judy Hall is an American author, teacher, and psychic. And she's also a crystal expert, and she's written several books about being psychic and also about crystals. She's written manuals about crystals. And I just looked her up. She actually passed away in 2021, so not that long ago. First year into the pandemic, basically. All right. So this book is definitely about spiritual alchemy. And I have to stress that because when people see the word sexual, they're like, ooh, this is about eroticism, but it's not. And for those who think that sexuality is not spirituality, I encourage you to do a lot of research. Okay, so what is spiritual alchemy? Spiritual alchemy is kind of like alchemy when you turn lead into gold. It has different stages for the soul. Those are called calcination, and calcination is the process of heating and decomposing raw matter, which would be our body, for example. Or it's also breaking down parts of ourselves in a way to find our own happiness, basically. The second step to the spiritual alchemy is dissolution, which means to break down our personality characteristics. And this is so that we can evolve. And this process of dissolution begins by feeling less identified with our illusory self or sense of self. Then we have the third thing on this process is the separation stage, which is all our thoughts and emotions are defined by practicing introspection, self-awareness, and self-analysis. So becoming really self-aware. Then the fourth step on this process is the purification and clarification of the first three stages, because we must integrate all that stuff that has been decomposing and separating and purifying and understanding about ourselves. So this is a book, actually, that was written, how do you say this? It's actually originally, this information that's in this book, is how I'm going to say it, comes from a manuscript that was found in Egypt by a person known as Paschal Beverly Randolph. He was an African American. He was a medical doctor, an occultist, a spiritualist, a trance medium, and a writer. And he is notable as the first person to introduce the principles of erotic alchemy to North America. He's also credited with establishing the earliest known order of Rosicrucian in the United States. And I'm going to link an essay about him and his life that's pretty long. I'm not going to go into all the things he did, but he's a very interesting character. Very interesting. have my own like idea about some of the stuff that I read, but I'm not going to get into that right now because we're focusing on the book. So I'll link it in this video so that you can check him out if you're interested in finding out more about him. He lived in the 19th century and obviously passed towards the end of the 1800s. In the introduction of this book, Judy Hall writes that this book can be considered fiction and nonfiction. So there's a component of fiction in it, which most people, when they read this, oh, it comes from an ancient Egyptian manuscript, so it's not fiction. But how do we even know that the ancient Egyptians didn't mean it to be completely fiction? We don't know. So there's that to keep in mind. I'm not saying that it is, but there's that possibility. And as a historian myself, I've been trained as a historian. I have to say that that's one of the problems of this book. The other problem is that it was originally found in hieroglyphics. So translating from hieroglyphics into English is going to cause another problem because we don't know if we understand the hieroglyphics 100%. There's a chance we don't. Nobody from ancient Egypt came and explained to us what exactly each hieroglyphic means. We assumed and accepted our assumptions. Then the third problem with this book is that the ending of the manuscript, of which this information has been taken from, is non-existent. So Mr. Randolph got the actual papyrus that had it written on it, but the last portion of it was completely torn off. So we're not sure exactly what the end goal was and what was to be accomplished, if that makes sense, from this manuscript. We do know that it is about the power of Sechem, which is Kundalini energy, and I've mentioned that in my book, and I've mentioned that everywhere else that I've spoken about this. It's about balancing masculine and feminine energy within ourselves. And it requires setting aside our ego and being completely present with our mind, body, and soul. I'm going to read from page 30 because it kind of elaborates some things about this chapter. So on the top of page 30, Judy Hall writes, "It is my opinion that only those adepts with a high degree of initiation into the esoteric mysteries can possibly have mastered and controlled will and high spiritual intentions required to bring about sexual congress with the divine within the sacred union of ritual matrimony. To have made a union with another human soul would surely create a further entity, a conjoined spirit, but to what end we cannot know." So she's saying that we can assume that this manual, this information that's been handed to us, is about creating another entity, but we're not really sure why. She said that the manuscript itself described the parts of the human so that there are different layers to us, right? We know that we have a soul and a body, but I mean, you might not subscribe to this worldview, but the Egyptians believed that there was actually more layers than just the soul and the body. So there was the Ka, which is our etheric double or our shadow twin. literally like a copy of us. That's our shadow. The Kat, which is our physical body. The Ba, which is the soul that is found in our actual heart. The Sikkim, which is our vital force or Kundalini, as I mentioned before. The Achar, which is a divine spark that animates all of us. And I took it to mean something like the higher self, but it's also that spark that I guess comes from God, if you believe in God. The Hu, which is the body of light, and we can think of that as the Merkaba. And she says that the alchemy of night describes how all these parts are united to create an immortal whole. So it's like a prescription of taking all these parts of us into one big whole so that we become immortal, as the text says. And there is one thing, basically, what this text is describing is Kundalini rising, the process of bringing Kundalini from the base chakra to the crown chakra, and how it can be achieved within a sexual context. And it's also describing it not necessarily with a partner. It's saying this can be achieved on a person like alone. However, there's also like a required period of celibacy that is prescribed within the text. There are, and it stresses the importance of marriage within this context. So like cautioning people not to engage in this Kundalini rising activity with a partner unless they are married, unless this is a committed, long-term, eternal relationship. Literally, that's what the text says. And I'm going to read that part right now, page 32. So the text was all actually written, the original one, the one on the papyrus, it was written by a prince, an Egyptian prince, and his name is Prince Khemyar Kefer. So it says, Prince Khemyar Kefer said, justified, peace be upon his name, recognized love within sacred sexuality and the bonds of mystic marriage as the foundation for the spiritual life. His unshakable certainty that humanity was created with dual gender expressly so that we might commingle our natures underlies the whole work. It is the highest calling to which a soul may aspire. As he so perceptively points out, the soul needs love as much as the body requires food. Love starvation, the nostalgia or homesickness of the soul, is the most terrible evil that can oppress the human spirit. So, we need love, we need to be with someone, but we also have to make sure that this coming together is sacred. And then we have the actual prescriptions. And I'm definitely not going to go into all that. I just wanted to explain what this whole book is about, because people tend to get into like assuming things, especially when there's a lot of like ancient Egyptian language in here. So we have 13 chapters totally in here. I'm going to describe chapter 1, 2, 3, and then 4, well, 1, 2, 3, and then 4 through 13. Those are things that I can't get into here. Number 1, because they're sacred. Number 2, because it's not my area of expertise. And number 3, because they're literally descriptions of what to do sexually with a partner. Okay, so we have chapter 3. No, wait, sorry. Chapter 1. So again, in chapter 1, Judy Hall cautions that this book is to be used with caution, especially when it comes to engaging in those activities with a partner, making sure that this partner is going to stay, because we have to build on those activities. We have to like grow together. And it says that you can also do this alone, so you don't need a partner for it. It also, in chapter 1, she describes a protection practice that can be used for anything else. Literally, it is recommended that as soon as you wake up in the morning, you do this practice. And it involves the Star of David, what do you call it? Yeah, it's the Star of David, basically, that is used as a protection. And again, I'm not going to go into that. You basically, like, it's kind of like the banishing ritual, very similar. So I bet that the banishing ritual comes from ancient Egypt. And then we have in this chapter also, Judy stresses the intention, aspiration, and imagination. So saying that we need to make sure that we're engaging with knowing our intention. What do we want to accomplish? What it is that is going to be the end result, and then using our imagination with focus. Chapter 2 talks about the lost key. The lost key is basically like the parts that were missing from the papyrus, and that we cannot retrieve. But also there's a deeper meaning to that, actually, with the lost key. Let me see if I can find it again, because I forgot to mark it. Oh yeah, she also says that it's important to have some sort of a prayer practice before beginning such practices. I'm always pausing in here. The lost key. Oh, okay, now I remember. So the lost key means that if we're unable to raise this kundalini and achieve the end result of this practice, which is basically, I don't want to say enlightenment, but becoming whole, then that would qualify as the lost key. Then chapter 3, she starts with saying that a controlled orgasm is a holy prayer that takes the initiate into multi-tiered, multi-dimensional cosmos that extends to the realms beyond the starry skies. And in chapter 3, she stresses that devout prayer must precede this moment of union, which must not be taken for selfish satisfaction alone. It is meant to be sort of like an elevation, so that spiritual entities or divine presence can be there. She says that human copulation is either ascensive and ennobling or dissensive and degrading, according to how one approaches that final moment and with whom it is celebrated. So the final moment meaning the orgasm. So you're either like ascending or descending, depending on who you're with and how and what you've done initially before beginning this process. I hope that's making sense. And if not, please write to me. I can explain further. Then we have chapter 4 to 8. And this is literally describing how to raise your Kundalini energy alone or with a partner. And it goes both for female and male. So there's a chapter specifically for if you're a male and a chapter specifically for if you're a female. Then chapter 12 talks about harnessing the magic of creation. So harnessing this energy. Once you have reached that orgasmic place, how to harness this creative energy. And it's not for the faint of heart. It's not an easy task. And then chapter 13 talks about the transcendental flame. And the transcendental flame, my friends, means that we are releasing constipated consciousness, is how Judy Hall refers to it. Because if this Kundalini does not flow, our consciousness cannot expand. And so I think constipated consciousness is a really cool term to use. Okay, and before I go, I will mention too, there are some appendices in here. There's 5 of them. And I can share with you what these appendices are. So it is kind of like a cool manual, to be honest, whether it's fiction or not, partially fiction or not. Now, maybe trying to figure out which parts are fiction and which are not. So Appendix 1 is crystal care. Appendix 2 is attracting a twin flame. Appendix 3 is spiritual divorce. Appendix 4 is tie cutting and partnership contract dissolution. And Appendix 5 is reframing past their sell-by date vows and contracts. And I found all these appendices really helpful because it's practices that you can go back to time and time again that help you cut cords with ancient contracts that you've taken on and modifying. Also, as you saw, there's also one about attracting a twin flame. And the purposes for these is obvious. We don't want to be engaging in sexual activity with a partner who's not going to be around for the long term, for a while. I think it kind of makes sense. This is like actually an ancient papyrus that said that, not me. Makes you think about what have we done to society? What have we tried to accomplish and have we accomplished it? And what are the steps we need to take to bring us back to that place where sex was considered sacred and it was not something that was sold and bought, but that was really intentionally engaged in with a purpose and a reason. And the reason being is to access God, to merge with God, to be with God within this container. of energy. If you ask me, I think that's pretty beautiful, as long as that whole sacred aspect is there. And then once we strip it away, yeah, we come to where we are right now. All right, my friends, please do suggest any other books you'd like me to review, and I'm happy to oblige. Take care until next time. Bye.